All right, everyone, there's an interesting article here. I'm going to go through these names that are on this list. This is one of the potential Trump VP slot articles that we've seen. I note again, and you got to notice this, most often, even legacy media articles where clearly they don't really like Donald Trump, it's from the Guardian or something, when they talk about who Trump's going to take aboard as running mate, they don't refer to it as a running mate, they refer to it as a VP. I think that's rather telling. I think that they're sort of showing what they actually believe semi-accidentally when they do that. We'll go through the list. And a new name has popped up recently, and he's first on this particular list. Senator Marco Rubio. It's Rubio! With the hands joke and stuff like that. And the most epic debate moment in all of presidential history when Trump brought up his hand size and said, there's no problem, don't worry about it. And, Marco Rubio then got crushed by Chris Christie. Where would I rate Rubio? Acceptable. He would be on the C list, in my opinion. He's relatively young. He is relatively well-spoken as well, unless he's talking to Chris Christie. You could do worse. I just think that it would be a bit of mediocrity. I don't think that there's anything particularly that Marco Rubio brings to the ticket, so to speak. So, I mean, if you had like a charismatic female, like Carrie Lake would run rings around journalists. Tulsi Gabbard would run rings around Kamala Harris. She's already done it before. That brings in, a freshness to the ticket. Rubio is acceptable. There's nothing particularly wrong with him. It's just that he doesn't really stand out. His rhetorical skills are good, but they're not particularly great. His age, that's perfectly fine. He's the right age for the job, but he's from Florida, and Trump's already got Florida. So I don't see what you add to the ticket, particularly with that. This article goes through the pros and cons mainly. Senator Tim Scott, Republican from South Carolina. Again, I'd say maybe a little bit above Rubio there. He's relatively unassuming. He's black. I hate to say it, but a lot of people are locked down in idpol these days, and so for what little it means, that would matter. He has sort of the evangelist tone. He's a relatively good speaker. He seems innocuous and straightforward. He wouldn't frighten anyone, like if Trump, just has a heart attack and falls down the stairs. Nobody would really be scared of Tim Scott. I'm just wondering if you're going to use him for political leverage as your running mate, he's going to have to campaign and stuff. I'm not sure. He doesn't have the it factor, if that means anything. Like when he was on Tucker Carlson. He was supposed to sit down and have an interpersonal conversation with him, right? Instead, he prowls around the stage, and Tucker Carlson looked like he was high on acid or something like that, didn't even understand what was going on half the time for an extended period there. Tim Scott is a decent orator. I wouldn't mind him. It certainly wouldn't break my resolve to vote for Trump, and if he were the president of the United States, I would think, okay, the country may not be in the most competent hands in the world, but it's in reasonably good hands. It would be, again, acceptable, just like with Marco Rubio. Senator J.D. Vance, yes, another riser on this list. He's been talked up a lot lately. I would say better than Scott or Rubio, but I don't think he'll be chosen, and I'll tell you why. He's a relatively charismatic man, relatively imposing. Trump doesn't work well with relatively imposing, charismatic males. This is why when Ramaswamy gave his endorsement, he did a few bits, and then he disappeared. Nobody talks about him anymore. He did the same thing to Chris Christie. Chris Christie had dropped out, endorsed Donald Trump. He expected to be like the head of the DOD or something like that, and instead he was shuffled on his merry way. That's because Chris Christie, while he doesn't have the it factor in the aesthetic sense, he is a very good, powerful speaker. Donald Trump doesn't like powerful speakers with the mafia mentality around him if they are male. Female, perfectly fine, not men. J.D. Vance, while he would be a perfectly fine running mate, I'd have no problem with it. I hesitate to believe that he would be chosen. Elise Stefanik, Republican from New York. Well, New York is leaning a little bit more red than it was in the past, with Lee Zeldin and the efforts of others, Scott Pressler as well. New York is within a few points of becoming a swing state, actually, which should terrify the Democrats. They were trying to pick off Texas. Instead, it looks like the Republicans might pick off New York. That would give you an advantage. The fact that you have a New York-based, and technically Trump's from New York, although he now resides in Florida, VP could tilt things in that direction, but I think it doesn't tilt it enough really to change the metrics of New York politics enough. I mean, you can't win the state. You can come closer. And so, again, I think there are other charismatic females that are more well-spoken. Stefanik, again, she is close with Trump. She's done a good job with him. I would be surprised if she didn't get a cabinet position. I'd also be surprised, though, if she was chosen for that position. Byron Donalds, again, acceptable. I think that if you're going to go with the black man as VP route, you'd be better off with Tim Scott, actually. Again, he's from Florida. Scott's from South Carolina. Florida is more in the bag for Trump than South Carolina. Byron Donalds is not quite as skilled at speaking as Tim Scott. He seems more forceful. The other part is that he seems more forceful. Trump doesn't want forceful males around him. Doug Bergam, Republican from North Dakota. State-wise, doesn't net you anything. And Bergam can be a grumpy old man. Again, though, it would be acceptable. Bergam does have some principles, berated his own party structure for effectively icing him out in the debates, and that sort of tit-for-tat thing would, I think, endear him to core MAGA. I think core MAGA would like Doug Bergam. They'd have no problem with him. I just don't see how it brings any more independent voters aboard, necessarily. Maybe some marginal libertarians, because they'll get echoes of Ron Paul. They're like, oh, the Republicans have done this before to a candidate that actually had some standing and some good ideas, keeping them out of the debates, acting like they were crazy. His name was Ron Paul. In that sense, I guess he adds something to the ticket. I just don't know. I don't know how consequential that it would be. Kristi Noem, Republican, South Dakota. Again, the state is off the table for the Dems, so that doesn't matter. Kristi Noem would have been my choice for the VP slot up until the dog story. And I don't say that because I have any problem with the dog story. Yes, if your dog is attacking the neighbor's animals and then attempts to bite you, in rural America, sometimes animals get put down. I mean, if the dog had attacked somebody else and even nipped them, they'd get euthanized anyway, generally speaking. People need to understand it's different in rural America than urban America. But suburban voters aren't going to get the hint. They're not going to get it. They're not like me or somebody who lives in the Dakotas. They live in a suburban neighborhood. And they think, oh, Fluffy would never hurt a fly. And if Fluffy hurts a fly, then they cry when the dog gets inevitably euthanized or something. They can't understand it. Noem has fallen, in my opinion, far down the list because of that. That's the long and short of it. It shouldn't be really a factor, but it really hurts her as far as becoming VP. Ben Carson, again, innocuous, relatively quiet. His religiosity rankles me a little bit. I mean, he's pretty much on the Jesus thing. Would I be afraid of him being president of the United States if Trump has cardiac arrest? No, of course not. He'd probably do a good job. He's intelligent. He's well-spoken, but he's also quiet. He pretty much fits the bill, and he has run for the presidency before. Ben Carson, yeah, I'd put him fairly high on the list. I would say better than acceptable. I would have no problem with Ben Carson being VP, and it would be meme-worthy. It'd be humorous. And also Tulsi Gabbard. This is my personal pick. I realize that some people disagree with me. They think she's disingenuous. She's a former Dem. She's not on the up and up on every single issue. I think that her transformation, though, was genuine. In my opinion, it was genuine. She's forsaken the anti-gunnery. And I think it's partially because of her ego, much like with Trump. Trump is partially trying to be reelected and do a good job because he wants to be loved. He wants the Triple Crown, in other words. He's only got one more gem to stuff in that crown anyway. It's partially egotistical, but it drives him to do a good job. With Tulsi Gabbard, I think at this point she's semi-motivated by hate for the Democratic Party and for the way that it treated her. Throwing her under the bus, totally threw her under the bus, calling her a Kremlin agent and everything like that. And for that purpose only, I think that she'll screw in the knife as much as she can. She's a good speaker. She's already lambasted Kamala Harris before. She was one of the reasons why Kamala Harris didn't become nominee. We need to give her credit for that. I said it wasn't the main reason, but it was definitely a sideshow. She crushed Kamala Harris. totally destroyed her. If they rematch for a debate, what do you think's going to happen? Tulsi Gabbard is going to run rings around her, and it'd be one of the most funny things ever. If anything, if Trump doesn't choose her, it's because he's afraid he's going to be upstaged in the debate capacity. So I would personally choose her out of the list of people. Ben Carson, I think, would be a second. There's also one more person that's not under this list. They're talking about DeSantis and Nikki Haley and stuff. Long shot possibilities. No, there's no shot whatsoever. Another thing would be there would be a dark horse VP. You know, nobody knew who Mike Pence was until the short list was announced. Nobody knew who the fuck he was. They figured, well, you know, Trump will probably choose like Ted Cruz or something like that. Now, in the end, it was somebody that nobody ever fucking heard about. And so there's always the possibility the 10th person on the list would be name unknown because you literally don't know who they are. The Dems have done this too. You remember when Obama was nominated? Nobody knew he was till that keynote speech, and few people knew about him until he threw his hat in the ring and thankfully managed to defeat Hillary Clinton that time around. Then Trump managed to defeat her again. Boy, that poor bitch's trajectory in politics. That's about all. Peace out.